Great question. So KB is asking, if you as a programmer generate code using generative AI, should this code be considered acceptable if you cannot explain it to your coworkers? I'll give you 4 reasons the answer today is no, and 1 reason the answer in the future could be that could be fine. For the 4 reasons today is no, I'll also provide you 2 solutions to take unacceptable generated code and make it acceptable. I thought about these exact questions when I was increasing adoption of AI tools for code generation and generative AI as the leader of the Python Guild at my recent company. So let's call this code naively generated. If you haven't done any vetting, it's just been generated. The first reason that naively generated code is unacceptable is that these tools hallucinate today. So the code might not even work. You need to be able to read it to understand whether it works and whether it works in the way that you're desiring. Even if you expect a float, you verified it's a float, is it the right float? You need to actually step through the code. A second independent reason that naively generated code is unacceptable is that it might be maliciously sourced. Let's say you're using a custom GPT, and the creator of that custom GPT is malicious, unbeknownst to you. You get a string that is supposed to be run in a Kubernetes pod. You think it's a useful command. Unbeknownst to you, you run it in a production system and you've just hacked yourself. The third reason that naively generated code is unacceptable is for the purpose of maintainability and extensibility. What if it works perfectly today and it's non-malicious, but you want to change it tomorrow? If you can't read it, it's going to be extremely difficult for you or your coworkers to update that code over time. A fourth reason that naively generated code might be unacceptable is if it's too large. So let's say that me and you are seniors and we're perfectly capable of reading not only ordinary code, but even very convoluted code. Yet we cannot read this generated code. The question becomes why? One answer that's actually realistic is if we just don't have time. If there's so much volume that I could read it line by line, I just can't get through all the lines. That's a smell that this change is too large. You shouldn't be putting that in a pull request anyway. Even if the code was like perfect, you should break up your commits. And you probably want to break up your Agile user stories. So those are 4 reasons that naively generated code would not be unacceptable. You, as the individual contributor who is also the prompt engineer, are the first line of defense for your organization and for your end users against low quality code. So you are the first peer reviewer for Copilot. It's called Copilot. It's supposed to work with you. It's not doing everything for you. So you peer review the generated code. Once it meets your quality bar, then you're able to bring it to your coworkers. Now let me ask, for your quality bar of your own code, can you read it? I think you should be able to. Readability, maintainability, these are best practices of code that we write even if we didn't have generative AI. So let's bring it up to that bar and then bother our coworkers. So those are the 4 problems and the 2 solutions for naively generated code today. And I think this will be the situation in software engineering for the next 5 years. Now let's imagine a situation 10 years or further out in the future where you might be able to accept naively generated code. 10 years or more in the future, let's imagine a situation where the generated code is readable, effective based on requirements, maintainable, extendable, and secure. You can imagine a 3-part AI system where you have a generator, an adversarial AI audit for security, and then an agentic process to cycle and fix until the 3-part system is content. Further, imagine that this generated code is large in volume such that it's infeasible for a human to read it. How much volume? Well, you can imagine an entire enterprise application being translated into a different language through the use of a generative AI transpiler. In fact, it could become the case that we simply maintain our application descriptions in ordinary language and we don't deal with the code at all. So we work on the higher level abstraction of ordinary language. In some sense, this is just another compilation or transpilation step. So think of infrastructure as code. I might not deal directly with CloudFormation syntax. I might deal on a higher level with CDK or an even higher level. And in web development world, I very rarely deal with HTML and CSS directly anymore. I'm writing in like Next.js and then it's being compiled or transpiled. So in the future, we can just deal with ordinary jargon and spin up entire applications. This is already being done to some extent at a low quality with agentic tools that are large language model agents that can write some code. The applications don't work very well today, but in 10 years they might. At that point, you want to think of your code base as your iPhone. So me anyway, I don't know the low level details of how my iPhone works. I just know the jobs that I have for it, the tasks that I want to accomplish, the price point that I'm willing to offer, the time I'm willing to invest to deal with it. And if it meets my criteria, my testing criteria, you can think of it that way, then it's good enough for me. And I think 10 years or more in the future, when programmers might be focusing only on prompt engineering rather than programming, It will actually become acceptable if there are sufficient checks in place to ensure the code is maintainable, extensible, secure. If you can have AI tools deal with that review, then it's left to the humans just to ask, does the product do what I want? And then it's actually okay to accept the naively generated code. So I think we're looking at a far out world, like 10 years or more. But I think that could become a possibility. And I actually think it's an exciting possibility. Thanks again for the question. Follow for more tech content.